Hi friends, welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new here, my name is Courtney and we are making homemade French bread. This French bread is so easy to make. Let's get started. So to start, I'm going to add warm water to my stand mixer. I'm going to add 2 1/4 cups of warm water, about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to add in 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. You could also use instant. Then we're going to activate that by adding 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. And then I'm going to let that sit for about 5 minutes so the yeast activates. Then we're going to go in with 7 cups of unbleached flour. You can add a tablespoon more or so if you need to when you're in the mixing process. Then I'm going to add some salt. I'm using 2 teaspoons of salt. And that's just regular salt, not kosher salt. And then I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And then I'm going to mix this on speed 2 for 2 minutes. And then I'm going to let it rest for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to check if it needs more flour, which it did. Then I beat it again for another 2 minutes. And then I added that flour with that. And then it was perfect. You want to make sure it's not too dry because then it'll be really dry. Sometimes my mixer gets stuck when I make dough, so I actually have to whack it out a little bit. Then I'm using the remainder olive oil, and I'm going to put my hands all over the dough and then actually just roll that dough all around in there to get the bowl nice and moistened with that oil. You could also rub it with some more oil or even use a new bowl, but I find that it doesn't stick too much that it's a big concern, and then I could use this bowl again and I don't have to waste too many dishes. And as you could see, the dough is beautiful. It's really got that elasticity that I want. And then I'm just scraping any bits out of the bottom and then shaping that dough. So this way it's kind of all put together. And when I grab it out, it's a nice form dough. When the dough is pressed, it should rise slightly like that, which is perfect. We're going to cover that with saran wrap or a wet kitchen cloth that is clean and let that sit for an hour to rise. When it is just about done, you're going to take some flour and put some flour onto a clean prepared surface. You could also use a baking mat that is good for rolling out like pie crusts and stuff if you don't want to use your counter. I'm going to be using a little bit of flour. Some people like to use, a little bit of grease. You could use like olive oil. I prefer to use just a little bit of flour. Just don't go too crazy because you don't want your bread to be dry. We're going to take our rolling pin and we want to make this into a long square about 12 to 14 inches in length. And we want to make sure when we're using the rolling pin that we're squeezing out any air. If you find any air bubbles when you're done rolling, you could use the palm of your hand and try to easily squeeze those out. But the rolling pin does a pretty good job. If you don't get those air bubbles out, you're going to have a big pocket or a few pockets in your actual bread, and you don't want that when you're slicing. This is a way to minimize that. Then we're going to roll it up just like you would like cinnamon rolls, although this would be really good with like a garlic bread spread in there. I am just rolling this up, and then we're going to keep rolling it up. If it's sticking a little bit, you could use your hands ever so slightly, use your thumbs to push it up a little bit. And then we're going to make sure it's nice and closed on the ends. You want to taper those ends down. And then when you do put it on the baking sheet, I use a parchment lined baking sheet, and then I put the seam side down. So you'll see the seam is on the bottom when I pick it up. I'm just making sure those ends are nice and tucked in and everything seems sealed. It looks great. So this loaf is ready to be placed onto the pan, and then I'm going to start my next loaf. Now, what I love about this recipe is if you wanted to do one with sesame seeds or one with poppy seeds or even one with everything bagel seasoning, you can absolutely do that. We're going to roll it the same way, right into a rectangle, and then roll it right up. And then again, if you want, you could also make this into smaller loaves. You're just going to have to cook it for a little less time. Once you're done, I like to use my fingers and like massage the countertop to get any dough that is sticking, and then make sure you clean it up because flour can have some bacteria that we don't want. So make sure you clean up your work surface after you're done and you are all tidy. Now I'm going to make an egg wash. I'm using 1 large egg with 1 teaspoon of water. I'm using cold water for this. And then we're just going to whisk that up and beat the egg. I'm going to take my bread lame. You can also use a serrated knife or even a sharp pair of scissors. And we're going to make 4 scores across the bread. You can even do 3. Up to 5 is probably the best bet. I like to go between 4 or 5 depending on how big the bread is. And then we're going to take that egg wash and just baste it all over the bread. We're not going to get the underside of the bread, just all around and all on top. We want to make sure each piece is covered. We're even going inside where we scored. So this way when it bakes, it's not like a whitish weird color in there. It's going to have that nice golden egg washed appearance. Now we're going to set that aside while I grease my plastic wrap. You could also use a wet cloth, but I find that I have had that stick before, so this is usually what works best. So I'm just using a little bit of avocado oil. You could use a little bit of vegetable oil as well. And then I'm going to put that oiled saran wrap right over top of my bread. And then we're going to let this rise for another hour. So we're going to set that aside in a warm area. I like to preheat my oven about 25 minutes before the time, so it gets a bit more of a rise. It makes the kitchen nice and warm, and you can see it's nice and risen here. I'm going to place that into my oven. I have it preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. My little guy could not wait for the bread, and you're going to bake it for 22 to 25 minutes. The longer you bake it, the darker it will get. Be honest, I like it a little lighter. My husband likes it a little darker. And then once it comes out of the oven, I like to take a little bit of butter and then just brush it all over the top. You don't even need to use a pastry brush. You don't have to melt it. I literally just take an actual stick of butter and rub it all over the bread. When I make a French bread, I like it to be a little softer. That is why I'm using the butter. If you want it to be a little bit more crispy, I would skip the butter and just leave it as is. But I find that it gives it a nice pretty shine and also adds a nice soft texture to the bread. It is ready to slice and enjoy. You can enjoy this warm. You don't have to wait like you would with like a sourdough. And then it's just like pillowy soft. It is absolutely perfect. I cannot wait to enjoy this. I use it for garlic bread, bruschetta toast, even just enjoying with bread and butter. So our French bread is all done. It looks and smells amazing. As soon as it came out of the oven, my kiddos were like, can we have the bread yet? So I had to slice it up. My favorite way to enjoy bread, I just like a little bit of butter, or maybe a lot of bit of butter. Some people probably like a little less, some people like a little more. I love fresh bread with butter on it. It's nice and tears easily. I'm gonna take a bite now. Nothing beats homemade bread. Okay, maybe mashed potatoes. I have a thing for potatoes. So now I'm gonna go and slice the rest of the bread up, put it in the freezer because it freezes beautifully. And then I'm gonna turn the other one into garlic bread for dinner tonight. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye, friends.